Welcome to MacroCode. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. So we are going to proceed with the employees management system, and today we are going to do something interesting. So as you can see on our dashboard, we have employees records where you can actually create an employee. For those who are following this channel, we have the leave types. You're able to create leave types. You can also create a new leave application, and this leave application can be approved. So some of you guys requested we do kind of a workflow that allows multiple approvers, and we'll be considering to do that. So then we can approve leave application. You're able to see the leave applications that has been approved, and you can also see those that has been rejected. So we also did a way to register users. As you can see, we have our users, and actually we tied our users to roles, as you can see. Then on system roles, we were able to add all the roles that our application handles. Then we have system profiles. So under system profiles, we were able to add the modules. So we were adding the modules and the parent, that is the parent module and the sub modules. So we'll be using this to actually kind of tie our applications to some of the rights, so that we are also able to ensure that users can actually access specific modules or sub modules. Then we have under system administration, we have the designation, department, banks, country, system settings, system codes, and system code details. So, but this data, we are actually creating these records without capturing the audit trails and even knowing, assuming we want to know who created what. So we can actually tell that by checking on the created by ID and the created on. But we can actually also have a table that tracks all the changes that are done within this application. So on today's video, we are going to create audit trails and also to be able to track all the changes that can be done within our application. Because you remember, we have actually done authentication in our application, and we can now tell who has created what and at what time. So without much information, let me just dive in. Let's go to our models. I'm going to create a model. And for this model, I'm going to call it audit. So I'm going to call it audit. Then we'll be having some properties here. So I'll just do public int. Then that will be our primary key. Then within our audit table, we can have one. So is the string. So we'll be tracking the user who created the. So this will be user ID. The user who has done the modification, either deletion or update or even anything. So I'll do that. Then I can also do type. Then we can also do, so this type will be, we can actually call it audit type. So this audit type can be either you deleted a record, or even you actually added a new record, or there's something that you did. So then we want to also create the table name that was affected. So I'll create a table name. Then we can also do another thing here. We can have date time. At what time was this operation done? So I'll say here date. We can call it. Let's just call it date time. Then I'll also have another one here. So that is the string. Then we can say old values. So these old values, we want to capture in case you are trying to modify some records. We want to ensure we archive all the values that you are modifying before you actually modify them. Then you can actually also capture the new values. So we'll say new values. So these are the values that you are now passing to our table. Then we can also have affected columns. So we can say affected columns. We want to see the columns that has been affected. And you can say what was the primary. So I want also has to store the primary key of that specific table. So I'll just say primary key. And as you can see, that is the information that we'll be capturing. So the next thing that I want us to do is we can actually have an enhance here. So I'll just do audit types, and these audit types I'm going to specify. So this will be num. So I'm going to do that. Then I'll say if you did nothing, so for none, I'll be passing it a value 0. Then if you create, for create will be, so I'll say is equals to 1. Then let's just do that. For update, I'll call it 2. For delete, I'll call it 3. So these are the update types that can be done. You either did nothing, you created, you updated, and you can. So you can also have another one. You can say maybe it's a login. So you can say login will be 4. So we want to also capture at what time did the user log in and the rest. So as you can see, that is some of the audit types that we'll be having. So the next thing that I want us to create is I want us to create a class, and we are going to name that class audit entry. So I'm going to, so this will actually kind of give us all the information that we'll need. Audit entry. So this audit entry is a class, and I'm going to have a constructor here. So I'll just do CTO, then a tab. Then within our constructor, I'm going to have entity. So I'll say entity entry. Then within entity entries, I'll give it a name. I call it entity or entry. Then our entry, so I'll say entry. So I'll call it entry. So entry is equals to, so I'll just have that way. So what is this entry that you are specifying here? So this entry, I'm going to have it here. I'll just call public entity entry is equals to entry, and we have assigned it our entry. Then I'll also have public. So here I'll say public string. Then I'll have my user ID. Then I'll also have my table name. So I'll just do that, and also have my table name. Then I'll also have, so I want to get now the values, the old values and the new values. So I'll do, so this will be kind of a dictionary. So I'll just say dictionary. Then this dictionary will be string and object. So I'll do string and object. Then this will give me now the key values. So I'll say these are key values, which will be equals to you get. So we're not setting anything here. Then we'll do that. So I'm going to do that, minimize this. Then this will be new, and we actually have it that way. So this will be string, and we need to close it. So I'm going to close this one that way. So another thing will be the old values and the new values. So I'm going to have this, copy that, then say here old values. Then the same thing. So this will be old values. The same thing will be the same thing. Then we'll also have another one for new values. This will be a dictionary of our new values. So we'll say new values. Then we can now get the audit type here. So I'll just do public audit type. Remember the audit type that we just created. Then I'll call it audit type that way. Then we can have a list of changed columns that has been affected. So I'll say public, then list. This will be a list of strings. So I'll call it a string. Then you can say this is a change. So we call change columns. Then I'll do, so I can do here get. So I'll do get, do that. Sorry. I'll do get. Then this will be new list. We are initializing it. So you can say list, then string. Then I'll call this. I'll have it that way. So this is a public here. This change columns, we can do that. Then we need to close this. So after that, I want us now to have now define our audit here. So I'll just say here public audit. So you'll say public audit. You'll say to. So you'll say to audit. So this is what we need to pass to our table. So we'll initialize. We say variable audit is equals to new audit. Then we'll assign now the values. So our audit will be audit dot user ID will be equals to user ID. So let me just copy this here, try to pass that way. Then here I'll say we have the user ID, then we'll have the type, audit type. So I'll say audit type, then here I'll say audit type dot. So it will be audit type dot. I'm going to do that, then say dot to string. So we'll get the audit type and we pass it to string. So that audit type can be create, modify, and the rest. We can also now have here the table name. Our table name we can have as a table name. We assign it the table name value. The audit, we can also have the date time. And this one we can get the time that now. So you'll get the current timestamp. Then we can say here primary key. So what is our primary key? Our primary key values, we need to convert this to JSON. So we'll be passing this to JSON. So we'll say JSON convert. So I'll say JSON convert. Then so I'm going to import something here. I'm going to import using Newtonsoft. Then I'll do dot serialize object. Then I'm going to pass the key values that we've defined at the top there. So key values. So these are the key values. It will be actually a dictionary. Then the next thing that I'll do is the old values. We need also to pass it as a JSON. So I'll just do here old values. Sorry. So I'll do here old values. Then I'm going to pass here old values as well. So these will be old values. But these old values, assuming you are creating, that means our old values can be null. So we can say here old values dot count. If we count and it's equals to 0, then we can assign null. And we do that. We provide the values there. So I'll just say if so this is all values. All values is equals to all values dot count. Then if that is equals to 0, we need to reassign. This should be a single. So I'll just remove that. So and we can do this. Let's just have as a count. Then if that's okay, we assign it the value of null. So and you can see here we can. So there so this one we can try to, let me see if that works. Let's just leave it as it is. Then I'm going to copy this as well. Then I'm going to say here, if this is we want to assign now the new values. So the new values, if you also check the new values are not there, then we can assign it null, or if they are there, we can give it the new values objects. So these are the new values. It is actually a dictionary of strings. Then we can also have another thing, the affected columns. So here I'll just do that and say affected columns, and we can check if there is a change. If change columns is equals to 0, then we can assign null, or we can update with the new columns. Then after doing that, we've now have all the data that we need to pass to our audit table. So we now need to return it. So I'll return audit and our error should go. So as you can see, we've now managed to add everything, and this will enable us to track the changes within our context. So as you can see, we have done everything. So one thing that we need to now do is we need to define our audit identity context. So that audit identity context will now be able to give us everything that we need to do before actually saving our records. But that one, we already have our DB application DB context. So what I'll do, if you come to our application DB context here, I want us to do some modification here. So at the top here, we can just do here before even doing anything. I want us, when we just I want us to create a method here. We call it public. Then will be a virtual one. So I'll say virtual async. Then we say task, and this task we should expect to return for us an int. So then I'm going to say this will be save changes async, and for every save that we will be passing, we need to pass with the user ID. So I'll say user. So I'll say user ID. So if we just save data to the database, we need to pass the user ID, and this can be nullable. This can be null, so we'll assign it null there. Then after doing that, this is actually a method, and inside here we'll do something. So we'll say I'll also want us to create another private method here. So I'll say private void, and this class will not give us anything, and we should before saving we can call it on before saving. So on before saving changes. So what should we do? We should actually track the changes that are being saved. So, and we also need a user ID when saving the user details. So, but before that, I'll just do this, and we are going to use this. So when you save, when we actually save changes, we should first trigger the on before saving changes, which actually will handle all our audits. Then we need to pass this user ID that we are supplying. Then after that, we can now say variable result. So we'll now save the changes after we have done that. So we'll say variable result is equals to await. Then we can say base dot save changes async. So we are going to use this save changes async. Then after doing that, we should return result. So we should return results. So this will return now the results from our save changes. So, but now on before saving changes, should now do what we need to do. One thing is to now track the changes that we have and save our audit changes. So this is where now all our process will need to be handled. So we are going to say change tracker. Then we can do detect changes. So that's the first method that we need to activate. Then we can define our audit trails here. So I'll say audit trails, or we can say audit entries. So sorry, audit entries. Then these audit entries will be equals to a new list. So I'll say list of what? List of our audit entry. And you remember this audit entry that we defined, it is actually here. And this audit entry will give us now all the changes that we need to pass to our database. So then we need to loop. So we'll say for each of say variable entry, then for each of these, so this will give us a list. So for each of these change tracker.entries, we need to loop through. So this will give us the changes, and we need to loop through. So then I'll say if the entry, so I'll say if entry dot entity is audit. So if that is audit, or can actually pass, so we can actually pass here. So we can actually pass here, we can say or, then we say entry dot state. If entry dot state is equals to entity state, so we'll say entity state dot detached. So or, so we are going to, we need to do another or here, or entry dot state is equals to entity state dot unchanged. So if that is it, then here we'll just do continue. So we'll just do here continue, then that is it. So then we need to do, if we can define another variable audit entry now. So you'll say audit entry. So if this is nothing has happened here, we can actually proceed. But if there is something that has changed, so we'll say audit entry, say new audit entry. Then I'll pass my entry here. Then, so you remember our audit entry, it is expecting on our constructor, it was expecting our entry. So I'll just come here to application DB context. So our variable here, we can now say our audit entry. So we'll do dot table name. So our table name will be entry. So this is the change that will now give us the name of that table that is being changed. Then you can say entity type. Then we need to get the name of that table. So we'll say entity. Then you can say get type. Then we can do dot name. So that will give us the name of that table. Then the name, the next thing is the user ID. So the user ID will be the user ID that has been supplied here. So this is what we'll proceed and pass it here. Then we can also, so that is the user ID. So the next thing is we need to now add these entries to our audit entries. You remember we defined these audit entries. We'll now say our entry here will be, so sorry. So we'll say audit entries. So I'll remove that. Then we'll say audit entries dot add. So we now need to add our audit entry that we've defined here. So this is the value. So it will give us these values and we add to our list here. So after we do that, we need now to check something. So, and I'll want us, so here we said if this, so I'm going to have this into bracket. So I'll just do into bracket, or we can actually leave it as that. So we'll say that is add. So we've added audit entries dot add audit entry. So then another thing is we need to look through the properties of this entry. So I'm going to say for each, and we need to detect the columns. So we'll say for each, then I'll do variable property in entry. So we need to get the properties of that entry. And this is kind of like a table. So we are going to loop through these properties, and we will say string. We can get the property name. So we'll say property name is equals to property that we are looping through here. Then we can get the name. Then we can say metadata So we'll say metadata dot so we'll say metadata.name. So that will give us the property name. And we can check if this property.metadata is actually a primary key. So we can say if the property that we are looping, so we can say if the property dot metadata, so then dot is primary key. So we can actually check that. If that is primary key, then we should, sorry, this should be primary, is primary key. We can say is primary key. So if that is a primary key, then remember on our audit, we need to ensure that we also add that as a primary key. So we'll say here, our audit trail, our audit entry here, dot key values. So we need to define the key values. We need to pass here. So we can do key values. Then you can say here, square bracket. We can say property name is equals to property dot current value. So I'll just do that dot current value, and that will give us. Then we also need to proceed. So we'll say continue. So we need to proceed. So the next thing is, after we have done the if, I want us to switch now. So we want to check the states, whether someone is adding, deleting, modifying, or doing anything. So I'll just do switch. Then I'll say here, switch entry. So you remember we are still within an entry, this one. You are still within this for each. So I'll say entry dot state. We want to get the state. Then here I'll just do that. Then I'll now say case dot state dot added. Then we are going to say here audit entry. Our audit entry should be, so you should now change our, we specify the audit type that we want to check. So remember our enums that we were using. So I'll just say enum dot audit type. I can actually say here, instead of doing that, I can say audit type. Audit type, you remember our audit type, then I'll say dot create. So if I do that, I don't need to break. First, I need to do something. So I also need to pass the new models, the new values. So I'll say dot new values. Then I'll pass the property name, and I'll say here is equals to property. So this will be property dot current value. Current value. So let me just zoom this. So if I do that, and here I'll now break. So then I need now to go to the next state. So I'll just copy this and paste it here. I can now check if someone is deleting. So if you are deleting, I need to assign the audit type, and I'll say this is a deletion. And I can also pass the old values. So here we are passing the old values. So when you are adding, we are checking the new values. When you are deleting, we need to archive the old values. Then we break. Then the next thing is if you are doing deletion, so that is deletion. So we need to check if you are modifying. So you'll say if modified, we need to check the property. Then here we'll say if property. So we'll say property dot is modified. So we need to check if it has been modified. So if it has been modified, we need now to assign our audit type here, and we need to check the columns that has been modified. So here I'll say change the columns. So that is the only time you are checking the change columns. So we'll say change columns dot add. So I'll say here dot add. You remember that was a collection. Then we'll pass the property. So here we'll pass the property name, and that is okay. Then we can now also check our audit type. So I'm going to pass this down here. Then I'll say audit type is actually modified. So here I'll say update. So that was what we used. Then we need to check, we need also to archive the old values because this user is modifying the values. So our old values will be that, then we will now pass the original. So these will be original values. So it will be giving us the original values. Then we also need the current value, which will be the new values that they are supplying. So here I'll say new values, and here will be current value. So if we do that, then we should be able to have our old values and new values. And if someone is modifying, we should check that there are some columns that were updated. Then after doing that, we can break, and we shall be now good to go and do everything. Now, after doing this, I want us to do something. So you remember all these for each. So we need now to get out of this for each. So that was one. This was the second, and we need to get out of this one. So after getting out of that, let's just go. This is where, after getting out of the for each, we need now to ensure that we, for each of the, so we need to do another for each here. We say now we have our entries. You see this entry that we've been adding. So we have all our entries here. So I'll just do here. So this is entries, and we are adding. So what we need to do now is after adding all those entries, I want us to come here. Then we say for each audit entry. So I'll say audit entry, and we are looping through our entries. And inside here, we now need to add it to our table. But we didn't add our table. So you remember we created a table called audit. So this audit, we need to have it as a table under application DB context. So I'm going to add it here. So I'll just do public DB set. Then this, we need to have our table there. Then we can call these audit logs. So I'll just call it audit logs. So that will be our table name. So after that, we need now to ensure that we add these to our audit logs. So I'll just say audit logs. You see, this is audit logs. That is our table, and we need to add all the changes. So I'll just do add. Then we need to add the audit entry. Then we'll say dot to audit. So this will give us all the values, and we need to do that. Then that will change. So we've now done everything. And remember what we need to do now. We've added a new table called audit logs, and we need to update migrations. So to do that, we are going to add migrations so that we are able to have that table. So I'll just do a NuGet package manager. Then I'll clear here. These were previous migrations. So I'll say add migration. Then I'll say audit logs. So if I do audit logs and run the migration, our migration file should be generated. So I think up to there, guys, we are doing well. So if you are new to this channel, consider subscribing, like our video, comment down below, and we are going to do more of this series. So if you like the video, you can consider buying us coffee, and we'll be happy to appreciate. So you can see we now have our table called audit logs, and it has created with all the columns that we have. So I'm going to update now my database. So I'll run update database command to get now the new table in our application. So sorry, that was wrong. So I'm going to say update database. So if that runs, so let me just open my studio so that you're able to see. So that is it. So let's just confirm, and we are going to see how that will be done. So you can see our table has been added. So we have these SQL commands saying, sorry. So it's saying we have the create audit logs table and all these columns. So if we go to our database, I'm going to open our database. And here I'll just open the database, and under employees, which is our table that we are using. Then we'll be having our audit logs table. You see, this is the audit logs table. So if I do that and select, I should be able to get nothing here. So you see we have the ID, table name, all this. So we've not added any record so far. So what I need to do now, we need now to make our audit trail in action. So, and I'm going to demonstrate that with a simple, so we are going to do that on our leave types. So on our leave types, you remember when we were creating here. So on our leave types, when we press create, I want us now to do something. We were passing the user ID. So I want us to create. So here I'll say context. Then I'm going to say here save changes. Then we need to create and save that record. So on our save changes here, I'm going to pass the user ID. So you remember on our save changes under application DB context. So let's just go back there. We have these save changes here. Save changes async, and it is expecting a user ID. So what I'm going to do on our leave types controller, I'm going to pass my ID here. So that ID, this will already know that we are trying to pass the user ID is logged in, and we will be tracking the changes. So let's just check how our application will behave. So if it will actually create the records here, the new records that has been added, the person who added, and the change type. So let's just launch our application. If everything goes well, our application should be able to run. So there we go. So I'm going to say admin, and I'm going to provide my password. So if I sign in, I should be able to log in. There we go. Then I'll go directly to the leave types. And remember, we are adding a new leave type. So here I'll say leave type, and I'm going to say these audit logs. We are trying to check the audit logs, and I'll say these audit logs changes. So if I click save, our application should save everything. So you can see we have something wrong. So you can see cannot insert the values into column affected columns. So that means there is something that we've missed. So our affected columns is actually mandatory. So if you go to our audit table, you see we have the affected columns. So that means the affected columns can be nullable. So I'm going to change this to be nullable, and also the old values can be nullable. The new values, we can have it as nullable. The table, that one should be okay. The primary key, I think we can leave it as it is. So I'm going to change that. So let's just run migrations again. So I'll do that. Then I'm going to add migrations and call this audit logs changes. Then I'm going to update the database. So if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing, comment down below, like our video, share, and even if you feel the video is good, you can also consider buying us coffee. So I'll just say database. Then that will update our database. So when we are adding a new record, some of the columns maybe are not, so we are not tracking the columns that has been affected. And also when you are modifying, so I think that is the reason. So let's just launch. So when we are modifying the data, we are able to track the columns that were affected. But for the new records, we're just capturing the record that were inserted and the new values. So let's just do that. Then let's say this is okay. So login. Then we should be able to, there we go. So I'm going to leave types again, add our new leave type. And here we had said audit logs, and here we had said audit logs changes. So if I click save, our application has saved. You see, it has saved these audit logs changes, and you're able to tell the user ID and the name of the leave type. But now when we go to our database, let's see if there is something that has been added. You see it was empty. So if I click here, you can see I now have the user ID, the type of the audit, which is actually create, the table that was affected, it is leave type, the date, the old values. This was a new user insertion, so that we didn't have any new values. So the new value, we didn't have any old values, but the new values is here. So you can see these are the values that has been inserted. It is actually in a JSON format. The affected columns, we don't have the affected columns because we are not modifying. So I don't want to track that. Then here we have the primary key of that table. So if we try to add another one, so I'll just add another one. I say leave, so I'll just put in some weird characters. I'll also do that, save. If we go here, every insertion that will happen will be tracked by our application. You see, it is another create. So assuming we want to now check on the modification. So that was an insertion that we did. So for the modification, we need to ensure that we give our application the first value that was done. So let's go to our edit. So I don't know if we had done our edit here. So if I do edit, yeah, I think we can update. So let's just go to our edit under leave types. So under leave types, I'm going to say under edit. So this was edit. So on editing here, we need to say, before actually doing anything, we need to say here, we need to get the old value. So we'll say old leave type. Before even saving will be equals to. So we need to say await context.leavetypes.find. So we'll say find async. Then we need to pass the ID of that leave type. This will give us the old value. You see, we have not saved, so we need to get first the old value. We need to get the old value here. So we'll say get old value before doing anything. Then we'll now have our update here, which will now say context.entry. So I'll say context.entry. Then we pass the old value here. Then I'll say dot current values. Then we can say set. So we'll say set values. Then I'm going to set the values of our new leave type. So these will be our new leave types, but the old values here will be our old. So we are going to do that. Then after that, we are going to save changes, and on our saving changes, remember we need to pass the user ID. So who is the user ID? I'm going to get this. So this will give us the user ID. So I'm going to have it here. So this will give us the user ID, and that user ID we should supply it here. And remember, for our model, for this leave type, we need to ensure that we are capturing the modified by. So I'll say modified on will be the date time, and we can also capture the modified. So this will be modified by, and we should supply that user ID. So if we do that, let's now consider going to our trying to change our update our leave application. Then we're able to see the type of logs that will happen. So if you are new to this channel, consider subscribing, like our video, and comment down below. So I'm going to do that. Then let's see. So that will track our old values and the new values. So I'll just do that. Then do here. Then I log into our application, and we are going to do a change or a modification of our leave types. So I'll just come here. Then I'll say edit this leave type, and I'll say our code here is annual leave. Then I'll say annual leave type. Then this was done by macro code. It was done on this date. It was modified by macro code. It was modified on this date, but this one will be added automatically. So if I click save, it should change our leave types. You see, it is now annual leave. Before it was an, but this one is annual leave, and we have changed this to annual leave type. Created by is that one, and the rest of the details. So if we go to our audit logs table, we should be able to see another entry. You see here we have 2 entries, but our audit type here should be modified, and we should be able to know the old values. So if I click execute, you'll be able to see now that our user ID is my ID. Update is the type of the audit. It has affected this table. This was the time of the update, and you see the old type. You see we changed our code to earn, to then the new values was annual leave, and we are able to track the new values, and we can be able to tell the changes that we did. You remember we changed the code, the created on, modified on, and the name of the leave type, and we are able to tell the primary key. So the primary key of that leave type was the first ID. So that is how you do that. So assuming we want to delete, so let's go back to our application. So assuming we want to delete, let's go back to our application, and I'm going to on delete here, we'll say delete. This is so you'll go to the post method. You see here we have said find, then it will remove. But then the only thing that you need to pass on deletion, I'll just pass here. So I'll get the user ID on our post. So I'll just pass here and have my user ID here. Then I'm going to add my user ID here for the save changes. So that one will track our leave type that it was deleted. So let's just confirm that modification type, and we should be able to know that that was an audit type of delete. So let's launch our app, and we should be able to see all those changes. So let's just go back there and log in. So I'm going to say admin, then I'm going to log in. So on logging in, I should be able to go to my leave types, and I want to go to the leave types that I don't like. For example, this kind of leave type, I want to delete it. So I'll say delete. Then I'll just click the button, and when we go back to our leave types, this was 3 of them. If I execute, we now have the 4th one, which is a delete type. It is affecting this column. The old value is this one. The new values, it will actually be removed from the database, the affected values, and we will already know the primary key was number 6. So I'll just delete another one. So let me remove this one. So I'll delete. I'll also delete this one. So I'll try to delete some. Remove also this one. So I'm going to delete that, delete these as well. So it will be tracking all those entries. I'll also delete also this one. So if we go back to our table for audit logs, we will be having multiple deletion that has happened. You see, it is actually tracking all these deletions, and you'll see the values that were there. So you can see we are able to get these values, and we can the new values and the IDs. So how are we going to ensure that we can be able to see those audit logs within our application? So let's scaffold that. So I'm going to our controllers, then do add new, then new scaffolded item, MVC controller with views using entity framework. Then I'm going to choose my model, which is actually audit logs. So I'll just say audit logs. So I'll just come here to look for my model. So that is actually audit is the correct model. Then I'm going to say here application DB context and audits. So that will now generate our options for CRUD. And the only thing that we need to remove is we need to ensure that no one can delete the audit logs. So we'll remove the deletion actions so that we don't ensure or have people deleting our audit logs. So those entries will be permanent, and no one should be able to remove them. So you see, you should be able to track all these changes. And if a user refuses that they didn't do anything, then you can be able to give them these details. So our audit logs has been generated, and you can see it is actually pulling the data from the audit logs. If you go back to our views, we'll be having a folder called audit logs. This is the audits, and you are able to see here. So I'm going to have, I'm just going to have this in a data table. So under index, I'm going to have this. And remember, we don't have the create action for our audit logs. So we don't create. So we'll say system. So this will be system audit logs. Then I'm going to remove this. Our title here will be system audit logs. Then I'm going to close here, and I'm going to remove these delete and also edit. So the only thing you can do here is the details. You can view the details. So I'll do that, then close here. I'll also close that. Don't know if you have anything else. After doing that, I'll format my code so that it looks a bit cleaner. Then I'm going to my layout. So under shared, I'll go here, then layout. Then I'm going to have under system security, I'll have system. So I'll say system audit logs. So system. So this will be system. Then you can say audit logs. So that will track our audit logs, and here our controller name should be. So we'll say our controller name is audits. So we'll say audits. So if we go back now, we launch our application, we should be able to see all those audit trails that we have within our application. And if we open them, then we'll be able to see all the details. So let me just open that and see if we have anything. So I'll do that, then I'll say this dot, then I'm going to do that. So there we go. So if I go to system security, then we'll have a system audit logs. So if I click audit logs, you'll be able to see we have now these entries. So you see we have the user ID, the audit type, the table name, the date value, and we have actually kind of so if I click here, you'll be able to see the new values, the affected columns, and the primary key. So these are the changes that we have been able to have. So if we click details, it should give us all the details of our audit. So you see we have the ID, the audit type, the table name, the new values, and the primary key. So that is it, guys, on how you can actually create audit logs in ASP.NETCOREMVC. And for now, we are now done with audit logs. We'll be able to see that this table will be growing as we'll be going on with our development. So if you like the video, comment down below, subscribe, and see you in our next video. Bye.